Hello, tree fern, Dicksonia, Antarctica. I've called this video Tree Fern Carnage. I've been reading a lot of comments in Facebook groups recently about these plants, and I can understand why people are getting upset and distressed, because we invest a lot of time and effort and love and care into these plants. We also invest quite a lot of money, and when a plant that was one moment very lush and green and healthy looking suddenly does that, it's understandable why people get upset. So in this video I'm going to share with you some thoughts and some reasons why I think don't panic, and also some care tips going forwards. And a lot of these little comments are based on what I've read in the Facebook groups, and they really are just my thoughts. And we've had tree ferns for several years, and we don't always get down to -8 degrees centigrade. This year we did, and mine have always come back and survived quite well. Let me tell you why I think we shouldn't panic. The first reason is these plants are supposed to go down to -10 to -15 degrees centigrade in their native environment, which is places like Tasmania on the other side of the world. And actually we only got down to -8, I think, around here, and that was the result. So they've still got some tolerance left before they actually reach the maximum minus temperature. The next point I would make is I have a little thermometer device which I placed in the top of one of these crowns, in the middle of the crown, in the centre. And whilst I was monitoring it and comparing it to the outside temperature, the temperature inside the crown up there was always about 1.5 degrees on average warmer than the outside air temperature. So I'm also reassured by the fact that the crown wasn't quite as cold as the outside air temperature. The third point I would make is the little tiny fronds which are inside that crown, curled up, are covered in these little furry hairs. They're like little gorilla's knuckles, and those furry hairs will act as a kind of an insulation. So even though we have an outside temperature of -8 and an air temperature in the crown of maybe -6.5, the little fronds that are curled up in that little nucleus and curled up tight have also got that little furry layer of insulation around them. So I think that will afford them more protection. Now, as you can see here, I've protected mine also on the outside. I've put some oak leaves in the crowns. I've laid some straw on top. I've wrapped them in insulation, and then I've wrapped that insulation in these coffee sacks just for aesthetics. And it's all well and good doing this protection, and I suppose that would afford the plant some protection. But when it gets to -8 here, that's not going to stop it from getting to -4 or 5 inside the crown anyway. So if you didn't get round to protecting yours, I wouldn't worry too much about it, because there's a limit to what a protection that can do anyway. So there we go, the fronds have tiny hairs. The next point to reassure you is that these plants are prehistoric. They've been on this planet for hundreds of millions of years, and they've survived. They've survived a lot more than mankind has. So they must be pretty hardy plants, and they must be pretty tolerant of a lot of different circumstances, and their native environment has negative temperatures as well. So I would be reassured by the fact that these plants are survivors. You know, that will outlive me, I'm sure. And the final point for reassurance on my list is the fact that people have owned these plants in the UK for many years, and companies like the Palm Tree Company, which is where we bought these 2 large ones from, have been selling them into the UK for many years. And over those years we will have had low temperatures, probably even colder than the temperatures we had recently in the -8 episode that I've been talking about. And I think we would have known about it by now if there was a massive problem with these suddenly dying off. So whilst it's alarming, whilst it's upsetting, and I'm upset by it. I mean, this was a beautiful green lush sheltered courtyard until about 4 weeks ago, and it is upsetting. I'm not going to panic yet. So those are my 5 points of reassurance. I'm now going to move on to my 6 sort of tips, if you like. Now, I was asked on one of my tree fern videos what if we keep watering it? Won't the water freeze and kill it? Well, I advocate not watering these plants in the winter time, but I also advocate not allowing them to dry out. So that's why I use oak leaves and straw in the top, because it will keep the worst of the cold weather out, but it will also allow some natural dampness through. So yes, I would say if you were to keep wetting that and it kept freezing, I think you might be storing up problems for yourself, because you might be causing the ice crystals in the water to damage the cells in the plant. So I would say stop watering it, but I would allow it to stay damp by allowing some natural dampness to stay in the crown at the top. What do we do now at this point? Do we start interfering with it? Do we start cutting things off? Do we start moving it? Do we start wrapping it? My personal opinion is leave it alone. If it's damaged, the damage is done. If it's not damaged and we get down to -8, well, it's going to be the same problem. There's not a lot we can do about it right now. So I would say leave it alone. Just be patient, wait till the spring. Now, talking about being patient, I'm not saying that this cold spell won't stunt it and won't cause it or set it back or cause it to be a bit slower in the spring. But bear in mind that I had one of these tree ferns. It's the one right at the far back there. We'd had it for 2 years and it didn't do anything for 1 year. And we were about to take it back to the shop because we had a guarantee with it where we could get our money back. And suddenly, as if from nowhere, 5 fronds appeared. So my message there is, in the springtime, be patient, allow them to warm up, to start growing, and let nature take its course. And hopefully, with a bit of luck and a following wind, as they say, they'll spring back into life and we'll have lovely new fronds. Another question that was asked is, what do we do with these? Do we leave them on? Do we remove them? Some people have said, tie them down to the trunk because it will provide extra protection. I did see one photograph where somebody had already tied them up in like a great big pole and wrapped them in fleece, and I actually thought, well, you know, that can't have done any harm, but even that fleece won't have protected them from -5 or -8, but it might have protected the crown by, you know, keeping a bit of ice water off it or something. What can we do with them? Do we remove them? Do we leave them? What I'm going to do with mine is I'm going to cut them all off, but it's for one reason and one reason alone, and that is for aesthetics. I don't like the look of them. I think they're ugly when they're black like this, and it reminds me how upsetting it is. So when I finish filming this video, I'm going to go around and cut all these fronds off with these secateurs. Now, the question has been asked then, if you cut all your fronds off, does it cause the crown to close up? And is that good? Because if you've got a closed crown, how can the new fronds get out? Well, my experiences, and I've bought one of these with a very tightly closed crown, my experiences in the spring and in the growing season, if you keep that crown moist and soft, the fronds that come out from underneath have got enough power within them as they unfurl to just push it open anyway. So I'm going to cut mine off, and I've got no concerns about closed crowns. In actual fact, a closed crown might have been more beneficial in a very frosty period. So I'm very relaxed about cutting them off, and I'm very relaxed about having a closed up crown at the top of my tree fern. The next point I've written on here is, come the springtime, don't be tempted to start watering this too early. It needs to be growing really to benefit from watering, and it really won't start growing until the temperatures have started to warm up. And there might be this misconception that by putting water on it, you're encouraging it to grow. It will grow in its own good time. It will get enough water of its own volition, if you like, from April showers without soaking it to death in the early spring. When it does start growing, however, late spring into summer, you can't overwater it at that point, and we flood hours every day and the water's running down the trunk. But that's only once it started growing again. Now, I did read a comment on one of the groups where someone suggested to see if there's any life in the crown. Go in there now with your fingernail and scratch some of those hairs off, and if it's black, it's probably dead, and if it's green, it's probably still alive. Well, that's up to you, and I'm not saying that's bad advice, and if you really, really want to know whether there's life in it, then you might want to go ahead and do that. But I'd be more concerned about scratching those furs off the fronds and allowing cold in, and also possibly damaging the surface of the fronds and allowing disease in. So my personal opinion is leave well alone. Just leave it. Be patient. I am taking these off for the reasons I've described. Apart from that, I'm not doing anything with these. I'm just going to wait till March, April, when the average temperature gets well into the sort of the high noughts, above 4, 5, 6, 7 degrees, and then we'll probably think about removing this protection when there's no signs of any frost to come. So there we go. I hope that's been helpful. Hope it's been reassuring and useful. It's a sorry state. I will have been showing you some film of this little courtyard while I've been talking, some little cutaways, and you'll see that it's a bit of a mess. I've got them ranging from this 8-foot one down to an 18-inch one at the back there, and they're all the same. They've all gone like this. We'll see what the new year brings. Talking of New Year, it's New Year's Eve today, and just to reiterate what I said in my little Christmas video, thanks ever so much for being there. Thanks ever so much for watching and liking and commenting. I love doing these videos, and I love the comments and the engagement. And I will see you in the new year. Have a good time. Take care. Bye for now.